Awesome. Hey everybody, my name is Cam Amir. I work for Cribble. I'm the Director of Technical Alliances. I've been at Cribble for about 4 years, and with me on stage, I have two awesome customers with me. I have Pedro Borges and Scott Schwartz. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Scott Schwartz. I've been in IT for about 25 years, specialize in developing and implementing automation across a variety of disparate platforms, ranging from mainframes to mid-range legacy systems, and most recently in the cloud.
And my name is Pedro Borges. I'm a senior security engineer in Scott's team. I've been in the SIM space for about 8 years or so, and I'm a SIM admin, engineer, architect for the team, and do some security automation as part of that too.
And both of them actually work for Siemens, and we are going to cover what Siemens does, what Cribble does, and how they were able to leverage Cribble in their AWS environment. So I'll go ahead and let them.
Yeah, so we represent Siemens Foundational Services, which is a relatively new organization within Siemens that strives to provide developers with principal or, foundational services that enable developers to build and deploy SaaS-based applications securely and at scale. And we represent a central security team within FDS.
Awesome. So I want you guys to kind of frame up what the challenge was that you saw in your day-to-day operations, and kind of what was the, outcome you're trying to get to when you saw these problems that were happening at Siemens.
I would say that one of the primary challenges was being able to effectively collect and centralize a variety of critical security logs from across our AWS organization of 800 plus accounts. We developed some custom automation and tooling to do this, but it wasn't as straightforward as it may seem. We were dealing with different data sources that required different configurations, and that also required us to implement infrastructure, not only in our centralized account, but in every single account within our organization that our developers are utilizing.
And even, taking aside the technical challenges, because we built some automation to collect these logs, we still had to deal with limitations in SIM licensing. We just didn't have the bandwidth to collect all the data from all the places. And so that made us lack visibility. And so, another thing was that because of those limitations, we had to pick and choose what AWS accounts and what data points within those AWS accounts we wanted to bring into the SIM. So which meant we were blind. We didn't have full visibility, so we could monitor for threats in our environment.
And now the data sources that you were collecting from all these disparate AWS accounts, were they primarily AWS service data, or was it other data sources that were in those instances?
It was AWS native data sources. I mean, we were looking at things, typically high volume data sources like VPC flow logs, WAF logs, S3 data events, those kinds of things.
Gotcha. And without having, on a daily basis, what did it look like originally to get those data sources onboarded, and how did you do that?
Yeah, I mean, it depending on the data source, it depended on what that means was. So, for example, for WAF logs, we just couldn't get, because we sort of managed the environment, we could have set up the proper infrastructure and configuration to bring all those logs in, but we were sort of constrained to only picking and choosing specific events for WAF. And then if teams wanted more on top of that, then they would open a ticket to us, and we would sort of negotiate, hey, what exactly do you want? What's the volume, before we could even bring it in. And just speaking of WAF logs, I wanted to mention earlier, at one point, we, and going back to the licensing issue, we turned on WAF logs for all accounts, and it just blew through our SIM licensing in a matter of minutes. So we quickly turned it off and just had to pick and choose what we wanted to bring in.
I guess that's kind of the power of cloud. It's so easy to just enable things that you can just check that box, and then I call it the water bill effect. You don't know until you get that water bill. You're like, I did not know that we had to turn that stuff on.
That's right.
So now, walk me through how you saw that challenge and then came up with this solution. So what brought you to Cribble, and how did you get there?
Well, the solution for us started when Amazon released Amazon Security Lake. So I think it was about 2 years ago when they announced the offering, and it was really enticing for us because it was, touted as being the solution where you would be able to immediately collect all these different security relevant logs from across your entire organization with just a few clicks of a mouse. And we jumped on board. We were early beta testers or early, adopters of the service, and it was awesome. I mean, literally a couple of clicks, and we were bringing in all VBC flow logs, all S3 data events, and some other of the early data sources.
Yep.
So it really simplified our architecture because we didn't really have to deploy that infrastructure and all the automation that I mentioned before. And it was great. It was all centralized. It was in our data lake. We fully managed it. The problem then was that we didn't know how we could access these logs. Now, AWS provided some things that we could leverage. We could have looked at Athena, but yet that's another tool that we would have to train up our SOC analysts on,
Right.
and then start working, training with them, giving them access to it, and it just didn't make sense. And then even if we did get the data, because even other tools like, we're using Splunk, so that Splunk had an app that we would be able to use to directly ingest all those full fidelity logs out of Security Lake and into our Splunk environment. But now we're also dealing with something else, which is OCSF. So, the cool thing about the Security Lake product is that it's using this standardized schema,
Yep.
which is great. However, you take a simple event like a VPC flow log, one line event, just a dozen fields or so, and now it's expanded into this gigantic JSON
Yep.
event. So before we were having trouble ingesting these logs because of this, the volume we were bringing, and now they're even larger.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a problem that we had to, solve, and that's where kind of Cribble came in.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's where Cribble came in, and Cribble had been on our radar for other. We had read about its data reduction capability, so it had been on our radar, but we hadn't really checked it out fully. But then when we learned that we could leverage it to get data out of Security Lake, we really paid attention and started evaluating it. And once we started checking it out, we quickly learned that we could use it to easily get data out of Security Lake. And not only get data out of Security Lake, but also reduce, transform, and aggregate the events such that we could get them into our SIM. And not only that, we talked about the OCSF. Well, some of the field names used there, they're very descriptive, but it's not what our SOC analysts may necessarily be familiar with. So Cribble allowed us to rename some of those fields into field names that our SOC analysts are familiar with. And in some cases, we were able to even use field names used by the Splunk Common Information Model, which when fed into our SIM, it's key to us because we can leverage those field names for security detections and dashboards that our SOC analysts are already using. So
Yeah.
it made it so that we can not only transform, reduce the data, but also make it useful pretty much out of the gate.
Yeah, one of the common themes that I've seen with Splunk customers and other customers that are leveraging SIM is that, yes, OCSF gives you that data format, that schema, but occasionally your SIM is going to need specialized, especially if they're doing like accelerated data models, things of that sort, that require either it be common information model, ASIM, the list goes on for standard schemas. So Cribble does give you that capability, and in this kind of approach, you're basically modernizing your data collection, data management, and it allows you to have this freedom to, you want to send the data to Amazon Security Lake, you want to get the data out of Amazon Security Lake, you want to send it to Splunk, you want to see how everything operates. I mean, this is where I think Cribble does have a good kind of, obviously I'm pitching, it has a good kind of capability around all this data collection. Between our agent at the edge, hence name Cribble Edge, we're very, very keen on marketing, as you can tell. And if you want to query the data, we call that Cribble Search. And then if you want to store this data in a data lake on its own, Cribble Lake gives you that capability. So now that we've given that quick commercial for Cribble, can you guys tell me how you leveraged Cribble in your environment?
Well, as you can see in this slide here, I mean, it's a very simple architecture. We pretty much just deploy a worker group consisting of one, in our case, one or two worker nodes per worker group. And we use them to read the data in Amazon Security Lake, do the transformation, reduction, aggregation before it gets sent over to our Splunk Heck endpoint, which then gets sent to our, our index tier, and we can do all the cool searching and investigations. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward.
Awesome, awesome. And giving you that flexibility too, I assume that's kind of a win-win.
Yep. Absolutely, yeah. It was daunting at first coming into a new product, but then once we realized, all I need to do is deploy an EC2, run the software on top, and away we go.
Awesome, awesome. Now for what everybody came here to see, the results. So how did this turn out when you guys deployed it in your environment?
Well, the thing that amazes me is really about the data reduction. That was, as I mentioned earlier, that was one of the key things that we struggled with, which was the volume of data and bringing it into our environment. Well, we were able to take, at the time, it was about 5 terabytes worth of data from a number of data sources and really reduce that to about 90 to 95%.
Oh, wow.
So from 5 terabytes to about 500 gigabytes daily, which was just amazing. And we had so much visibility into our environment, which we didn't have before, because as Pedro mentioned, we had to pick and choose. Which accounts were we bringing this data in from? Which data sources, did we want to allow for some environments but not others? Now we had it turned on, and we were collecting everything from everywhere, and it was being fed into our environment. Threat detections were running against all this data, and it was just amazing.
Awesome. And to add to that, we saw immediate value because as the data came in, we pretty soon after, our SOC analysts were able to use that data for security investigations and threat hunting, and finding out issues in our environment that they could then remediate, which is awesome.
So I assume that once you put that reduction of data, that you had maybe a stockpile of other data feeds that you weren't currently ingesting. And did that give you more freedom to send that data in and not have to worry about the storage or turning or having your SIM fall over with all the extra data sets coming in?
Absolutely. Once we saw the value that it was providing, we were pretty quick to start turning on the switches and enabling all sorts of other data sources. And I know what Pedro wants to mention, but there was also, we started leveraging it for other things outside of, Amazon Security Lake. We were using it as a syslog server and bringing in data streams from other,
awesome.
Endpoints. So it was, a snowball effect. We just started using it, and before we knew it, we were just using more and more as time went on.
So are you saying you didn't like configuring syslog servers at the config line?
That's right.
Yeah. That's right. So how many of your security folks were effectively data plumbers prior to having Cribble come in and start doing that?
Our environment, as I mentioned, our environment is kind of unique in that we have pretty good control over not just the SIM, but also a lot of the infrastructure. So we sort of were the ones managing some of this data. Cribble just simplified a lot of that. And it may simplify more as time goes on. Things that we have automation for to collect some logs that we may be able to get rid of that as time goes on and move over to Cribble more and more.
Sure.
But yeah, certainly it's definitely helped and simplified our operations.
Awesome. And you said earlier that originally you were trying to query that data in Amazon Security Lake using the Athena glue approach, or at least looking at that. And then you also ran into the fact that Cribble has the search capability. Can you walk me through kind of the differentiation between the two and what you thought of it?
Well, yeah, as luck would have it, we were having, I guess, what I would call a lowercase I incident. And we needed to go start looking at like S3 data events. We were looking for specific events. And at the time, we were not collecting those into our SIM. It was on our roadmap, but we hadn't yet do it. So we were able to actually go into Cribble Search, configure it in a matter of, as the slide shows, 5 to 10 minutes, and we were up and running and searching. So within a matter of 30 minutes, we found what we were looking for.
Oh, wow.
And we're still just kind of scratching the surface of, utilizing Cribble Search to the, extent that we may like, but it has definitely provided value.
Oh, that's fantastic. And by the way, there are a couple CloudFormation templates out there that if you go sign up for a Cribble Cloud account, which is free to sign up, you get a terabyte of data for free, and you can get search. Yet another plug. This CloudFormation template will actually do the automated creation of the IAM role and do the trust between accounts. So you can start doing this on your own with your own data. So just putting it out there. So with that being said, what lessons did you guys learn from this whole experience?
So lessons learned, some of the things we wanted to share was, as part of Security Lake, when you configure a subscription, under the hood, well, not under the hood, but also transparently, it will create an IAM role so that you can then use to read the data associated to that subscription, and it'll do that for every subscription that you create. In our case, we required multiple subscriptions for data, per data source, per region, things like that. And instead of having to manage each of those roles, we created our own custom role that then had access to all the data for all the subscriptions, and that way it simplified the management of those subscriptions and roles. The other thing is that when setting up your worker groups, you kind of need to pay attention to how many CPUs, how much memory each worker node has. And Cribble's documentation is pretty good as far as like telling you, hey, for this amount of throughput, you need this many CPUs or this much memory and things like that. So just make sure you read the documentation so that you don't stumble on that front.
And one of the other things, like I mentioned before, that snowball effect, due to the fact that we had such, amazing results and got so much value out of it early on, we hit the ground running. Mm-hmm. And I mean, before we knew it, we were turning on data sources left and right. We were bringing in, tons of data that we didn't have before, and it was great. But we had to deal with some other things that Pedro had mentioned, where we were running into maybe some resource contention issues, and maybe just didn't plan accordingly. So I would suggest, maybe thinking big, but starting small, and incrementally working towards, that goal.
Makes sense. And then from a best practices perspective, I can fill you all in on a couple things. Not only am I a game show host, but I'm also a recovering sales engineer. So when you want to talk about like architecture, that gets me going a little bit. Couple things. One, you can actually leverage the Amazon Graviton processors, so the ARM-based processors. They're much more efficient. So the documentation will basically tell you per vCPU, you can do about 400 gigs of data per day. With the ARM processors, there's about 440 gigs. You can double check the docs. But that gives you kind of a good perspective as to what kind of instance types you want to use, what size they're going to be. So like your C series and your C6, C7s are really good for this. They're available in all the regions, thankfully. And you get a significant boost, like I said, in performance with Cribble. Couple that with, there are CloudFormation templates out there that'll help you build these in auto-scaling groups. So all these worker nodes operate with kind of a shared nothing architecture. So you can deploy this, and if one of the worker nodes fails, one will spin back up and just start taking on the data load and start going through processing the data. And you can build this based on like a CPU load. So as you grow your cluster, you can basically have more instances running. To kind of go back just a little bit, here. The way that Cribble Stream is architected, it has those worker nodes. Actually, this is a better one. The good thing about worker nodes is you can actually take the data, and if you guys have like GDPR requirements, or if you have, you don't want data sets to cross or mix at all, worker groups can work in separate kind of logical separation, giving you the ability to make sure you're not crossing data streams or doing anything bespoke. You can do it by teams, organizations, etc. So it just kind of gives you even more kind of control and power of your own data. So I just wanted to put that out there. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about? Okay, so 40 minutes.
I just, as we were chatting, one thing that I'll sing the praises for is that, again, is that great visibility that we obtained after getting those logs in. And it's not just for, we've sort of focused on the security use case, but some of our internal teams, dev operations teams, they've been able to leverage this data. We, as part of our SIM sort of model, we don't just onboard data to onboard data. We onboard data with a purpose. and we build dashboards, detections around the data as it comes in, and these dashboards we expose them to the teams so that they can also look at their data, and we've been able to do that. I mean, we haven't used all the security lake data sources at this point. We focused around VPC flow. That was our sort of one of the big ones. Route 53 DNS logs, WAF logs, and then S3 data events, and teams can, we expose those dashboards to our teams, internal teams, not just the SOC, and they can because it's ultimately data that's coming from their environments. They can look and use the data not just for security, but also to see the status of what's coming in through the WAF for them, what's going through their VPCs and things like that. So that's been great, and not just adding value to the SOC, but also adding value to others in the organization.
That's pretty cool. And just kind of quickly, show of hands, how many of you here are using Amazon Security Lake today or been playing with it a little bit? Not everybody at once. I got one or two. Awesome. Yep. Awesome. I will say that when it was called Project Moose early on, when we first kind of got wind of it and started playing with it, it was a very interesting concept. One of the use cases that I think is one thing that you should consider is augmenting your SIEM with Amazon Security Lake. So effectively having the data land in Security Lake first, so you can actually see the data and actually understand it. And then one of the good use cases of Cribble is that you can send the data that you need to into your SIEM. So you can start creating particular rules, high severity or particular events that you want to go to your SIEM, do that. So this way you have good control and balance of that data. And I think ultimately what you get back is your time. Your engineers actually are now able to focus on threat detection and actually do their jobs, not sitting here trying to figure out how can we save money on this, how can we pull the plug here, et cetera. So just a couple points of thought. And deploying Amazon Security Lake has gotten much easier. So I would suggest you guys check it out. It's a pretty good product and a good way of getting stuff in. And yeah, I definitely welcome any kind of comments, questions, et cetera. Happy to talk through them.
And one more thing too is that as part of this, we're going to be working with Cribble to share with the community some of the work that we've done. I mean, to not say all of it, as far as the configurations within Cribble Stream, so that others can not have to redo this work. They can just use the same pipelines and functions that we're using. Obviously, customize it to your organization's needs, but that way you can leverage some of the field renaming, event reduction and aggregation and things like that, and not have to sort of redo work. But that's something we're going to be partnering with and hopefully releasing soon with the community.
Awesome. And I will say this, there's a capability within Cribble. So what he's talking about are Cribble packs. So if you think about it, it's basically pre-configured pipelines to allow this kind of creation of data, creation of fields, et cetera, downstream. And it's so much easier to implement if someone else has already done it. It's kind of like cheating on your homework, but you can then go in there and configure it and modify it to your specifications. So there is that capability, that freedom to do so in Cribble. So one more thing I wanted to say. It'll come to me in a minute. But yeah, definitely don't forget to rate this session. We need all the likes. I feel like an Uber driver, 5 stars. I don't know, is there anything else you guys want to talk about with your journey?
Just to say that we're looking forward to continuing to partner with Cribble and continue to get more value. We're already looking at other use cases within our SIM platform, how we can leverage it, and potentially working with other teams so they can get some of the benefits of data reduction and aggregation and things like that. So yeah, just looking forward to what's to come.
Awesome. Yep. Oh, that's what I was going to remember. I forgot. I interrupted you, but real quick. There is a capability to convert some of these logs to metrics. So if you go check out how to convert VPC flow logs to metrics, you can actually throw it into a metric store or time series data store, whether that be Datadog, Splunk, Elastic, you name it. And you can actually see VPC flow logs coming in and see kind of the trend in your environment without having to ingest all the data, because it's about a 90% reduction. So there's actually a Cribble pack for that. So again, go check it out, cribble.io. And you can go download and start up a Cribble Cloud instance on AWS, of course, and you can test all these feature functions out. Sorry, Scott, did you want to say anything?
No, it's good.
Okay.
Pedro covered it.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, I know that the happy hours and all kinds of fun stuff's going on right now, and I don't want to keep you longer than we need to. Thank you all for attending. We appreciate your time. And yeah, feel free to ask us any questions on the way out or anything of that sort. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.